Good. Actually, I've changed the title. Now the title is the same as the title of our forthcoming book, the book I've been writing with Julian Savulescu. And the talk I'm going to give is a sort of, well, it's a very short book, but it's not so short you can make, so you can summarize it in 25 minutes. But I'll be giving a sort of the backbone of the book, I think. So the book is about the need for moral enhancement, and it's by me and Julian Savulescu, although his name doesn't appear on this slide. Now, the first point, I've got four main points I want to make. The first point is that it's easier for us to harm each other than it is to benefit each other. To give an everyday illustration, most of you probably have access to a car and live in a densely populated area. I mean, judging by the taxi drive to this place, I mean, I realize quite a few people in Belgrade, they have cars, and it's rather densely populated. Now, by going for a drive, you can easily kill dozens of people by just plowing into a crowd. But it will be very hard for you to save the life of as many people. That would require that you are in a situation in which there is a threat to people's lives, and you have the capacity to avert that threat. You might be sitting next to a crazy driver or something. You can prevent him from plowing into a crowd. But, I mean, you have to be in certain circumstances, whereas you could easily put yourself in a circumstance where you can kill a lot of people. There are actually two aspects of this easiness to harm. The first is what I've been talking about, that the magnitude of the harm caused can be greater than the magnitude of the benefits provided, that we can kill more individuals than we can save the lives of. There's another aspect of it, which there are normally many more ways of causing harm of a given magnitude than of benefiting to the same degrees. More ways of disturbing a well-functioning system, like a biological organism, than of improving it to the same extent. I mean, because its functioning sort of depends on quite a lot of interconnection with quite a lot of various factors. And if we disturb or remove one of those factors, we will damage the working of this system. Whereas in order to improve on its function, we will have to find something which fits into in this whole integrated structure, which is a much more difficulty, because there are many more ways of causing harm to an organism, making it do damage to it. It's also the case that most things that happens to a well-functioning organism makes it perform less good. And this is what's known as entropy. In the course of time, sort of things fall apart, function less well, and so on. Now, even if it had been as easy, contrary to what I've argued, it had been as easy to save a life as to save lives as to kill, it would still not follow that it would be as easy to benefit as to harm. Suppose that a life is overall good, overall better than non-existence. Now, if we were to save somebody whose life is like that, we can't claim credit for all the good that this individual gets in the future, because that will be dependent on quite a lot of things happening in the future. But if we kill that person or organism, we prevent all this good that this individual would have had he or she gone on living. So, under the assumption that life is overall for the better, our capacity to harm will be greater than our capacity to benefit, even if it had been as simple to save a life as to kill. Of course, some people are pessimists, like Arthur Schopenhauer and David Benetton and so on, and claiming that life is overall for the worse. Life is suffering. So maybe, as Buddhism, you believe the same. Now, if that had been the case, it would have been easier to benefit people, because if you kill them, you would sort of prevent all the suffering that the future would otherwise have in store for them. But I shall proceed on the assumption that I think most of us take, that life is overall good. Now, sorry. What did I do? I'm not very familiar with this. Computer. So that's the first point in my my talk. The second point is that scientific technology increases our power of action, but as it increases our powers of action, our capacity to harm has been magnified to the point at which we can cause what we call ultimate harm. That is to make worthwhile life forever impossible on this planet. Now, as scientific technology increases our powers of action, our power to do good increases. But, as I said, our power to harm is greater. So it keeps us lead. It's always ahead. And now the capacity to harm has reached a point where we can cause ultimate harm. That is, we can make worthwhile life forever impossible in this planet. Notice that this is an act of this kind prevents quite a lot of goodness, because if it hadn't been for this act, life could have gone on. People and other animals could have gone on living, having worthwhile lives on this planet for thousands of years, perhaps. But if we do this act, we prevent all that. So the instrumental badness of such an act of destroying worthwhile life on this planet forever is tremendous. I mean, it's impossible to benefit to the same extent. So, I mean, there are various ways of causing ultimate harm. There are weapons of mass destruction. The most familiar ones are nuclear weapons, which have been around us since, Second World War, 1950s. It was people feared it, and there was a phobia about it in the 50s about nuclear weapons. It's quite difficult to fabricate nuclear weapons, but perhaps in the very near future it will be possible even for a terrorist group to fabricate nuclear weapons out of fissile material afloat, drifting around from the former Soviet Union, for instance, or whatever. Another kind of weapons of mass destructions are biological weapons. They're far easier to fabricate than nuclear weapons. Indeed, a single individual could do so. For instance, some scientists in Australia inadvertently produced a strain of mousepox that was lethal in 100% of mice in the mice population they examined. This result was published on the internet. If terrorists could get hold of information like that, they would be able to genetically modify smallpox to make it lethal in close to 100% rather than 30% as it is now, and make it resistant to current vaccines. They could then fly around and distribute it in airport terminals, underground stations, and so on. And it will infect thousands of people because the incubation time of smallpox is quite is 1 to 2 weeks. It would have spread. These people would spread it to other people and so on, and it would have a massive spreading before it was even discovered. So I think biological weapons of mass destructions are worth taking seriously as well. But there's a further threat to a different way in which scientific technology has sort of produced this threat to our survival. This is that it has produced an explosion of the human population in its colonization of the whole planet by giving humanity the means to an extensive use of natural resources. The human population, as you know, is almost 7 billion, and it's expected to grow to 9 billion or by 2050, and perhaps to 10 billion by the end of the century. Population growth is bad enough, but population growth will be coupled with a sharp rise in consumption in various populous countries like China, India, and Brazil. Now, the human impact or footprint on the earth, I mean, the sources we use and so on, and the waste product we produce, is a function of 3 variables. It's the size of the human population, the average level of welfare, or the gross domestic product per capita, and the efficiency of technology in the sense that how much welfare it can sort of generate out of a certain quantity of natural resources. Since the 1970s, we've been overshooting the capacity of the Earth. That is, in a year, we've been using more of natural resources and producing more waste than the Earth can assimilate in a year. And now, at the current time, overshoot day, that is the day when we sort of have used the capacity, we start overusing the capacity of the world, it has occurred since 2008 or something like that, in August or September. That means that we use 30% more resources, 30% more of the Earth's capacity than there is for us to take out. So there's an overuse, an accumulated overuse of the Earth. And of course, that can't go on, but it will be very hard to rectify that problem just by making technology more efficient. For instance, Clive Hamilton, in his book for Requiem for a Species, says that even if carbon units per unit of gross domestic product are cut by 90% to 2050, this won't be enough to prevent catastrophic climatic and environmental changes. Of course, such a great increase of efficiency, technological efficiency, is hard to come by. But there's a problem, because whenever human beings so far have been able to sort of use technology more efficient, they tend to consume more as well. So there's no sort of surplus which isn't used. And it's likely that that will go on happening because the huge global inequality. Consider the 2 countries which emit most carbon dioxide in the world, China and the United States. The population of China is roughly 4 times as large as the population of the United States. But the per capita emission of the United States is roughly 5 times as high as it is in China. Moreover, since 1850, the US has been responsible for 29% of the greenhouse gases put in the atmosphere, whereas China has been responsible only for 8%. In view of this historical record, China could claim to have a right to at least a per capita to a per capita rate of emission, which is at least as high as the United States, at least sort of 5 times higher. But of course that would be disastrous for the climate if China were to increase its level to that amount. Rather, equality has to be achieved by reducing the US level by 80% down to the current level of China. But of course that would be very difficult, if not impossible, it would be politically impossible, presumably, in the United States. And it will also be difficult to prevent China from not increasing the per capita emissions further. So the situation is that the astonishing progress of scientific technology hasn't produced the bright hopes, the bright future that we might have expected it to produce. Quite the contrary, the future of humankind now looks darker than ever. The prominent British scientist Martin Rees estimates, quote, that the odds are no better than 50-50 that our present civilization on Earth will survive to the end of the present century. Such an estimate would have been wildly implausible before humanity acquired the capacity to produce ultimate harm, when only things like supervolcanoes or hits by massive asteroids could cause ultimate harm to us. Because those events occur only once in millions of years or once in hundreds of thousands of years. So it seems indisputable that the contemporary scientific technology has markedly increased the risk of worldwide catastrophe, even if Rees's estimate of the risk might be somewhat exaggerated. You can't sort of put numbers on risk like that. So we're in a dilemma. On the one hand, we need a very advanced technology, even more advanced technology than we had now, in order to support a huge and growing population of the Earth in a sustainable way. On the other hand, advanced scientific technology comes with a horrifying risk because, as I said, it's easier to harm than to benefit. So if we have a great capacity to do good, it will be accompanied by a tremendous risk of ultimate harm. Now, what is the reason for us being in this dilemma? Well, it seems clear that the reason must be that we're not capable of handling this powerful scientific technology in a morally responsible way. Technology has progressed so quickly that there's now a huge mismatch between our technological and moral capacity. It's reasonable to hypothesize that our moral psychology has been shaped to fit the society human beings have been living in for most of their 100 100,000 years they've existed, and so that is small, close-knit societies with a primitive technology. And I should sort of detail some aspects of our moral psychology and morality, which I think is sort of part of what has made us fit for life in these societies, which are radically different from contemporary societies, which are hugely populous and which have this very advanced technology. First, we have been equipped with, this is a point where I'm sorry the PowerPoint went out, but anyway, we've been equipped with a bias towards the near future. Briefly and simply, this bias means that we are much more concerned about what happens to ourselves in the near future than in the more distant future. So if a pain or something harmful is postponed, we're relieved. If something pleasant we have in store is postponed, we're disappointed because we like the pleasant things to be close to us in time and the harmful things further away, because we're less concerned about the more remote future. Now, this is partly rational because what could happen in the remote future is always less probable. But our bias towards the near is sort of steeper than this difference in probability. Another thing is our limited or parochial altruism. And many philosophers in the history of philosophy have claimed that we're egoists. 1 minute, sorry. I have to be very quick. That we're egoists, we're concerned only about ourselves. But the truth is that we are capable of some altruism, but it has a very close range. And we care about our family, our children, our parents, our relatives, and so on. We also care about people we know from personal experience, friends, and so on. But our altruism isn't extensive enough to sort of extend all the way to people in faraway countries, and so on. Another thing is that our altruism is limited in the way that we're not capable, we're capable of envisaging, vividly imagine the suffering of a single individual before our eyes, but not of hundreds of sufferers and so on. So we're only capable of sort of feeling sympathy for smaller populations, few individuals, not great populations in proportion to their number. Another thing is that because it's easier to harm than to benefit, there is in our morality is to the effect that it's we consider it morally harder to justify doing harm, for instance killing, than it is to failing to benefit. This is the act omission doctrine, which says that it's sort of morally more difficult to
That's a shame.
I was just about to sort of rounding up this thing. So I've been talking about act omission doctrine. Part of that is a conception of responsibility as causally based. This means that our responsibility, our sense of responsibility for an event is proportional to our causal contribution, which means that if we're causing something together with other people, which makes our own causal contribution less, we feel less responsible for it. Now, it's quite easy to see how all these things combine to create those moral problems we face today. Because, for instance, the bias towards the near future, it makes us less concerned about the more distant future. But in order to do something about climate change, it's essential that we care about a more distant future. Because what we could do to the environment, to the climate today, the things cut down on carbon and so on, won't take effect until about 40 or 50 years from now. So we have to be concerned about a more distant future in order to be concerned about it. Also, the fact that our altruism is limited is significant in this context, because a lot of the climate changes we produce in the well-off countries will have bad effects for people in other countries. They would produce droughts and desertification in Africa and places like that. Also, the limited altruism is relevant to our to the fact that we have done so little to reduce global inequality, reduce poverty in developing countries. So the very last point.
Sure, it's not the penultimate.
Sorry?
Sure, it's not the penultimate one.
It is the last. It is the fourth. I said that fourth one. So I think we need moral enhancement to counteract those factors that I've been sort of going through in a sketchy manner, and to prevent us from causing ultimate harm. So I stopped that. It was the fun.